Wonderful. Folks, how are you today? Another one of our chapters of Southwick Stories. My name is Joe Didi. I have young Jim Putnam with me. We started this series this year, Jim. We've done quite a few. And like you said, the bucket's getting kind of low. So what do you know? Norm Storey shows up. Norm, how are you today?
Bottom of the barrel.
Bottom of the barrel.
No,
well, not really. My
No,
understanding is
not at all.
you are the originator of why we have real estate licenses. Is that true? You sold the first house in Southwick?
I don't believe so, but I sold a few of
You
them.
sold a few, though, huh?
Yes.
All right. So you go way back with Mr. Putnam here, I hear.
Yeah. I started my real estate company when I was 21,
Oh, wow.
and I'm still doing it 56 years later.
Wow.
And it's been a wonderful career. Was able to meet wonderful people, a lot of great people. Had the good fortune of probably selling around 1,500 homes and developing subdivisions
Oh, boy.
and
Wow.
made friends with some people, some not.
Yeah.
And in
That's
fact,
the norm.
Jim lived in one of the lots I had in one of my subdivisions,
Yeah.
and was able to buy 100 homes that needed help, and I rehabbed them and rented some and then sold them.
In Southwick.
Yeah,
Wow.
and I was also able to help some people. Real estate gave me a wonderful opportunity to help people. And a lot of people were unable to get bank financing or whatever, so I would help them. I'd take away all their credit cards, get their credit back in order, and then I would carry the mortgage for them
Nice.
for 5 years, and then they'd be able to go to a bank.
Literally, right.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So real estate industry's changed, though. It used to be a very personal thing. Now that's a lot of technology.
Yeah.
You don't get to touch and feel people anymore. It's basically, you've got texts and electronics and computers and there. So it's lost some of its flavor, shall we say. But it's necessary, and to compete today, you have to do that. And it's pretty fast-paced.
That's not where you started in Southwick, though.
I started my company in Southwick.
But that's not, your real estate wasn't your only game.
Oh, no, I've done a number of things. It became a police officer the same year, both 1968,
Wow.
and did that for 35 years.
In Southwick.
Yeah, and it was back then when we started out, you had one chief, one sergeant, and a series of reserve officers, which is what I was.
Right.
And
2 cars?
we had one
One.
when we started, and then eventually got to 2.
Wow.
It got big time then. But you'd find yourself, you'd be doing, back then you did church duty, where you directed traffic in front of the 3 main
The
churches.
churches were that busy at one time.
Yeah. And of course that is somewhat altered now.
Yeah.
Then you'd end up being a dispatcher. You'd sit in the dispatcher's seat and do some of that. And then you'd get to do several tours of cruiser duty. And so, being a reserve, you'd work anywhere from 5 to 50 hours a week.
Oh.
You'd get a lot of traffic details. Back in the day, we obviously had a lot of bars in town, and we had a lot of accidents, and probably there were good experiences with police work, and there's very, very lasting memories of suicides and serious crazy accidents and things of that nature. People you knew.
Yeah. Very personal quickly.
Yeah, but you did other things too. Like I would have duty standing guard at the migrant worker camp down on Tannery Road, so that they didn't kill each other. And
Wow.
then more interesting duty was standing guard at the Camp Berkshire girls' camp in the summer, keeping guys out and trying to keep them in.
As long as you brought up Camp Berkshire, we might as well, for our
Yeah.
listeners, say what it was and where it was, Norm, because it's not there anymore.
Right.
If I recall, there's a couple of nice log cabin homes there.
Right.
But
Really?
go ahead.
If you were coming from Congamon Road, you have Boyce Road. You come on Berkshire Avenue. Boyce Road on the right-hand side, and shortly after that, there were a series of cabins, and there was a hall, a big building where they did all their eating and things of that nature. And most of the girls came from Pennsylvania, and they would go to Westfield one night a week, and then the guys they'd meet up there would try to come in by water to visit them.
Oh, that's
And that was always interesting because you'd hear the whispering on the water, and you'd see these guys coming in paddling with their hands.
sure.
And they'd come up on shore, and I'd wait till they got halfway up the hill because it was pretty elevated. And I'd yell down to them, "You come up here, you're mine." And so they'd go running. And I can remember one time walking out. You'd walk around the grounds every 15 or 20 minutes. And I walked around the cabin, and there's a guy laying face down on the ground. He was drunk, and he passed out. So I went up to him, kicked him in the bottom of the foot, and he went off charging down the road.
Oh, I bet.
So it was a fun experience.
And these were seasonal tobacco workers
Yes.
for one of the corporations.
Hathaway and Steen.
Hathaway and Steen, I was
Yeah.
thinking. And I'm glad you didn't throw the Southwick boys under the bus.
Oh, I couldn't have been any of that.
No, because
No.
they were also well-behaved and genteel. And they would have known not to try to come in via the lake.
Oh,
I was just
yeah.
going to say that. Yeah, they had other access.
Oh, yeah.
They had other routes of access.
Yeah, it was. So police work brought me some very interesting experiences. Got to meet a lot of interesting people.
Yeah.
Got to meet a lot of non-interesting people. And I can remember we used to work at the Lakeview Inn
Oh,
every Tuesday.
Legendary.
Every Tuesday and every Friday night. Place was designed to hold 150 people. There were times when there was 400 people in there.
yeah.
And there'd be a line from their door all the way out to Point Grove Road waiting to get in. And you don't see that anymore.
No, you don't.
No.
So what were the police chiefs that you worked with, going back to the beginning, if you can?
Well, I worked with Jim Curran.
Yeah.
I was a civil defense police officer for 6 months, and Ravel Emmons was in charge of that.
Huh.
And of course, worked with Charlie Wolf and Henry LeBombard, who
AKA Bomber.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Bomber, and a guy I played sports with in high school as well, a good friend. And so those are the ones that were pretty much involved. And it took 35 years to work through all those.
Yeah.
And but it was a great time. You depended on your brother officers, and at the time I was on duty, they had your back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember times when we had a active motorcycle gang in town, and we would end up doing war with them frequently.
Oh,
And there was also an element, which I really don't share, but a lot of us lived under the threat of our lives. And you'd go home and you'd go to bed with your pistol under your pillow. So it's a small town with all the stuff the big cities have, just less of it.
yeah.
I want to go back to your real estate experience, because I'm willing to venture that you've sold more homes in the town of Southwick than anybody else. I don't think anybody's counting that, but I believe you have, because you started so young in your life, and you've continued it. If I recall correctly, I saw one or two of your signs on the lake this summer of properties that you're marketing. And I'm going to tell a quick story about my own experience, but then we'll go back to you. I bought 3 homes with Norm, going back over the years, still live in the 3rd one. But so my wife and I were beginning to look at properties here in Southwick. I looked at one up on the other side of town that we thought was very interesting. I call up Norm, and he says, I'll take you to look at that one, but that's not you, Jim. But I've got another one that I'd like you to look at. And so Terry and I meet up with Norm one day after church. He takes us through the house and through the property. Now, doesn't matter to Norm's part of the story, but it does to mine if Terry sees this. We go through the house, and I think Terry doesn't like this house. I love the property because there was 5 acres with it. Norm knew enough on that. But so we look at the property, we get in the car, we drive away, and I say, so what do you think? She says, I love it. And we stopped looking because Norm, and this was when I was in my 40s, and Norm knew what we needed, and we're still there 20-something years later. But that was how Norm's style of hometown real estate agent worked. He knew the town, he knew the properties, he knew the people. So thanks, buddy, for
most
that.
welcome.
But when you were selling people on the from outside of town on the community of Southwick, which you did very effectively, what did you tell them about why you want to live in Southwick?
Well,
What was
again,
the hook?
always, most real estate agents are inclined to show their own listings and try to sell their own listings. Because I had my own company, I was able to be comfortable showing everybody's listings. And that was helpful for some people in having a broader perspective and decision. But I would always indicate there was 2 things that came clear to me as I was selling real estate. Southwick offered reasonably priced real estate and a decent school system. And I would always take people on a tour and show them the Congamon Lakes. I would show them where the different churches were. I would show them the different types of situations where you would have a little more densely populated situations and a little more countrified areas. I would share with them our proximity to Connecticut and such. But when I started, a lot of people felt that we were way out in the boondocks. And you had to overcome that, and obviously people certainly have. I look at real estate then, I always based my thinking on accomplishment, and that money was secondary to accomplishment. And it was always well to look back on my parentage, Robert and Laura Storey, where they taught me about work ethic, they taught me about faith, and they taught me about honesty. And I found that if you are honest with people, they will treat you well as well. And honesty was so important in real estate. When you're in it for 56 years and you sell 1,500 to 2,000 different homes and you're never sued, that's a miracle in real estate. But I always enjoyed working with the people. As I met them and as I spent some time with them, I got to connect with them. And that helped me in helping them find housing. And I always looked at the real estate business as, I'm not going to sell you anything. I'm going to help you get what you want.
Right.
And
it worked very well for me, and still does.
And that was my experience with
Yeah.
you 3 times, but certainly the 3rd time around, we remember. Well, you've given us a natural segue. So you started out your life in Southwick. Laura and Bob Storey were your folks. If I recall correctly, you lived on Congamon Road. But I was just a little kid, right? You were one of the big kids. So tell us about growing up in Southwick. You've already given us a great introduction to that.
One of the nice things about being older is that you get a chance for reflection. and you get a chance to look back and think a little bit. You spent your whole life running and running and running, and
You sure did.
all of a sudden, you know, my average work week was 100 hours. And that was just average for 35 years. So I look back and I think about Amasa Holcomb. He was my great-grandfather. And I think about one of his daughters, Eva Holcomb, who was my grandmother. And I think about how accomplished he was and the things he was able to do. And then I think about William Storey, my grandfather. He was born in New York. His parents died very young. He was a foster child. And he ran away from his last foster home and went to work on a farm in Suffield. He earned enough money so he was able to pay cash for the 140-acre Storey farm
Wow.
on College Highway.
Where was that?
It's right where Coward's farm is now.
Literally.
Yeah.
The house, Coward's house, or the actual barns on?
It kind of kitty corners across, if I'm correct.
Oh, that
Norm,
whole parcel.
The farm-
From Congamon to...
Everything but the gas station.
Yeah, the
yeah.
farm ran
Yeah.
from Congamon Road down to College Highway.
Yeah, okay.
And there was an additional 40 acres on the far side of College Highway.
Wow.
There was an old farmhouse there where we had wonderful family times on Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Wow.
And, of course, that has since been removed. Yeah, my grandfather built a big barn there.
Yep, Gambrell Barn.
Yeah, and he built the second floor and porches on the house. And he built what he was proud of, the longest tobacco barn in Southwick.
Wow.
And he always felt proud that he didn't believe in mortgages. Everything was cash,
Yeah.
everything. So he was a very hard worker. He married my grandmother Eva. They had 7 children, and they too had the work ethic thing, but they were also very musical. All except one of the children was very musical, and they all played multiple instruments. And they would even go every Saturday night. They would play in their band at Newgate Prison,
Wow.
where they had dances every Saturday night. And they even got the opportunities to play on the radio. So they were pretty accomplished musicians. And
This is your grandfather's generation.
my
am I
grandfather
correct? Yes.
and his offspring,
And
all
his
of his
offspring.
offspring, my father and his siblings. And so that was a great experience. And growing up was wonderful because our house was on Congamon Road, part of the original farm. My aunt and uncle lived on one side, part of the original farm. My aunt lived on the other side, part of the original farm. My aunt and uncle lived down on College Highway just across the street from the farm. And my other aunt and uncle, who then ran the farm, lived at the bottom of the hill. So it was like it was just
Family
a
compound.
It was all a family compound.
Storey family
Yeah.
compound.
And family was very important. And my parents taught me that. You know, I can remember sitting around the radio and listening to the radio together. And eventually, when a TV came, that was a miracle. Yeah. And back in those days, you had party line telephones.
Yeah.
And you had a bread man who came to your house. Milkman came to your house.
I'm going to put you on the spot. Who did your family buy milk from?
At that time, I put it this way, we took milk from the farm a lot of times, but when that had a break, I honestly can't remember
Okay, that's
which
all-
one it was.
That's all right, because
Yeah.
there was Wolf's and there was Haas's and
Yeah, we
probably
were
a
way
couple-
we were way ahead of the Haases back in those days, and the Wolves. I don't think Charlie delivered milk to our house, and the meat guy came, and the knife cutter, the knife sharpener guy would come. It was just a very conservative farming community.
Yeah.
And obviously, good or bad, I think it's bad. You just don't have the farm feeling anymore.
No.
And I was very fortunate. I was able to work for one of the Arnolds on tobacco.
Let's talk about that in a minute, but let's talk, so what did your dad, who was Bob, what did he do for, what was his occupation?
My father ran the family farm down there for quite a while, and he was an 8th grade graduate. In fact, he was in the first class that came into the consolidated school in 1929. Before that was all one-room schoolhouses.
Right.
And he wanted to go to trade school. But at that time in life, the trade school had a waiting list, and he had to help support the family. So he went to work for one of the Andersons up on Vining Hill Road, Eric Anderson, and he ran their apple orchards and took care of their animals and such. And then Walter Anderson took over that business, and he got into marketing apples and blueberries and things of that nature, and my father was in charge of delivering them all over the place. And I can remember in the summer, every afternoon we would go to Granville and we'd load up a truck full of blueberries and peaches and apples, bring them back to our house, and at 3 a.m. my father would get up and he would bring that produce to the open market in Springfield, and all of the stores would come to buy their stuff at that point. And then he would distribute it in different parts. He would travel over Connecticut, New York, Massachusetts, delivering stuff. And I had a chance to work on that farm also, picking stones. That's a memory I'll never get over. Feeding animals and taking care of apple trees and such. So got to work on that farm, got to work for the Arnolds, got to work on the McLaughlin farm, harvesting hay and bringing in broadleaf tobacco. Got to work on the Putnam farm.
I'd forgotten that.
Yeah, I remember going there. I was good friends with your brother John.
Yes, you were contemporaries in high school.
Yeah, and a funny memory. He would invite me to your house, and the first thing we would do is go and ride the pig. They had this enormous pig, and we got to ride the pig some. But work-wise, I remember going over to the chicken farm in the evening and debeaking.
Oh, you got to do that. Yes.
Debeaking chickens and picking ornamental corn in the field, and in the heat of August, invited to go shovel chicken stuff out of the pens. And if you want to have an experience, it was Ammonia City, and it was hot, but it was work, and you did it. And then I worked on the Haas farm, feeding animals and taking care of the residue from 140 head of cattle, which was good. And got to work on, trying to think what other farms I worked on, for gosh sakes.
While you're thinking of that, I just want to go back here for full disclosure to those who might be concerned about the welfare of the pig. Usually the pigs gave as good as they got.
Yes, they did.
You didn't say that, but usually one of us kids who attempted to ride the pig would be in the muck within about 10 seconds. It was kind of like a rodeo thing, only with pigs, and only in a pig pen.
Yeah.
And I don't ever recall anybody, maybe you hold the record there too, Norm, that was able to stay on for much more than 10 or 15 seconds, because the pigs weren't having any part of these kids trying to ride.
Absolutely so.
So you mentioned that you worked for one of the Arnolds. Which Arnold did you work in? How old were you when you went to work
gosh,
tobacco?
I was old. I was just starting high school. And Feg Arnold.
Okay.
Yeah. And I didn't particularly care for, that's one of the things I did that I didn't particularly care for.
Okay.
But did that, and again did the Haas farm, and your farm, the McLaughlin farm.
You made your rounds
Yeah, I worked
of the southern part of town.
I worked on 6 different farms,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, that's-
which was good, and that was all part of the work ethic that was instilled in me. I was also blessed with the fact that I had very high energy. And
I guess.
so working my real estate business and working as a police officer and running an Arabian horse business at that time took up a lot of time, and it was all good. High school, my class, we graduated in 1964. We were the first class to go through 4 years in Southwick High School.
Oh, wow.
Before that, it was everybody went to Westfield.
Right.
And got to play sports, which of course the town had never had organized sports. So the town could not afford to have a football team. So we played soccer.
Yep.
And the guys I played with, including Bomber, we probably played it more like football than soccer. But it was fun. It was a lot of good camaraderie, and then got to play track and such, and that was good because every time you played, you set a school record
Yeah.
because there wasn't any. So
I'll have to check that wall.
Yeah.
I don't know if your name's still up there.
so it was always good in that respect. But
Do you remember who the soccer coach was?
Harry Syrian.
Okay.
Wow.
Can
Yep.
you tell us a little bit about him? Because I think he coached for quite a while.
He did. He again had no experience with soccer, but he was a smart guy. He was into science and chemistry kind of person, so he studied. And I remember the first time he came out and he brought a soccer ball out. None of us had ever seen one, and and he let us know what it was, and we proceeded from there and ended up having some pretty darn good teams. We played competitively and won. The first years we played, we had to play independent, and we took on all comers, and 3 of which sent a letter to the superintendent of schools saying, "We'll never play your team again." It got to be a little brutal.
Even back then, huh?
It got to be a little brutal back then.
I'll bet those farm boys, turned soccer players knew how.
Oh, yeah.
Knew how to throw
Yeah.
some checks. along
Absolutely,
the way.
absolutely. And it was just wonderful experiences in school.
Who coached track and field, and what was your event or
Okay.
events probably?
Yeah. Dick Utley, teacher, coached, and I think he had some experience with that. So again, first team we ever had, so you really specialized. I threw shot put, I threw discus, I threw javelin, I ran the 100-yard dash, I ran the 220 dash, did the running broad jump, did the quarter mile relay, 440 relay.
You must have been a tired puppy when you got home from
Full of energy, he
from a
says.
meet.
Yeah.
And it was a great time. Again, great team camaraderie. We did fairly well, not impressive, but we did well. We were competitive, and since then, of course, they've had really good cross-country teams in Southwick and good track teams.
So, just off the top of your head, 3 favorite teachers from high school,
Don Desmond.
so why Don Desmond?
He was my homeroom teacher. He was a biology instructor. Back in the day, I also did weightlifting, and he was a weightlifter. I enjoyed singing, and he was a singer. He was an accomplished singer.
Yes, he was.
In fact, he was a background singer for some very popular artists back in the day.
So Don Desmond.
Yeah. I guess I'd have to say Roxy Bedrosian because she was my first teacher in 6th grade. Back then, there was no kindergarten. So you just went right into 1st grade. And I would be remiss if I didn't say my third grade teacher, who was Esther Letourneau, who was my aunt.
Oh. Get that on the record. Yeah.
So you got away with things in those days that probably you
Oh, we
wouldn't
probably could
today.
Yeah.
So I'm leading the witness a little bit here, but where did you start your school career? What building, what
Okay.
school?
Right here in the original consolidated school. And you spent your time here until about 5th grade. And then you went to the powder mill school. And you were there until 8th grade.
Yep.
And then the high school, 9 through 12. And some, again, more great experiences, small town experiences, small class.
Yeah.
You knew everyone, and everyone knew you. And so it made life pleasant and a good experience.
So do you recall roughly how many kids were in the class that you went through Southwick schools with?
I think over time it got smaller because some moved on to trade school and such. But I think we graduated probably with about 75
Okay.
kids. Yeah, okay. And still communicate with and spend time with some of them.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you said you were a singer. That's new to me. Were
Yeah.
you in the music program at the high school?
Well, I was in the Glee Club.
Okay.
And of course was in the church choir,
What church was that?
the Methodist Church. By the way, congratulations.
Let's
And,
talk about that in a
Later,
minute.
yeah.
yeah, and my family was connected with that church for over 120 years. And I can remember, obviously, my grandfather and then all the siblings. And, that was the social center at that point of family life. And I was fortunate to be in the choir there. Of course, did all the Sunday school stuff there. And got to serve coffee at all the church suppers. And Mother's Day, of course, big time, or they had a big celebration there every Mother's Day.
Breakfast.
Yeah.
Mother's Day
Yeah.
breakfast. Yeah.
And remember collecting stuff for the auctions we had there and the rummage sales. And it was a wonderful part of life. It was a pure, clean, people who care kind of place. And it was a very, very active congregation at that point. Obviously, things changed. I moved to a different town, and I didn't spend as much time there, but they asked me to consult with them when it got to the point where there were very few people still attending the church. And the vote was taken to disband the church. I helped them. They had money left over in the coffers, much more than I would thought to be so. I think it was around $200,000. And I helped them in deciding where and who to distribute it to. So the food pantry and the fire department and the schools and the police department were able to take advantage of funding that they normally wouldn't have.
Right.
And obviously, they were able to place the property with you. And I see what you're doing there, and I think it's wonderful to see that facility you're developing for the food pantry. And again, my only hope and my thought in the back of my mind, and I'll use this moment to do that, was that as you mentioned the food pantry, and it being the Southwick Food Pantry, it might be interesting to say at the old Methodist Church. My thinking is there's got to be some reference made to that word as it was part of the history of this town.
Absolutely it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was fortunate to go there. My parents were very religious, very conservative. Never a swear word in the house, never a drink in the house, never a cigarette in the house. It was always very conservative Methodist living, which was okay. Certainly, I probably broke that mold a little bit, but I kept certainly the faith and the honesty and such that went along with that.
I want to fill in a little bit that we kind of moved by. We talked about your dad, Bob. Let's talk about your mom, Laura, a little bit. I recall her as a very sweet woman who was active in her own way. But tell us a little bit about your mom.
My mother was born in New Britain, Connecticut, and she worked as a secretary for a hardware company down there. In fact, I think it was the Stanley Works, and she was very close to the top in the secretarial area. And I guess she made the mistake one day of coming to Miller's Beach, and that's where she met my father. And he was in charge of, they had a big water slide at Miller's Beach, and he was in charge of kind of make sure people didn't get hurt there. And of course, they closed the beach when one person died from using that. She was a stay-at-home mom. I couldn't have asked for anything more or better. She also helped the school nurse, Sophie Swochak, with the shot programs and with that sort of stuff. She was active in the church women's club and the church couples club. And she was always there for people. I can remember when I spoke at her funeral at the church and how she considered, certainly as time passed, the church as her family, her extended family. And they thought of her in the same way. So I was very lucky.
And you can correct me about this. My recollection is that she was also the Southwick correspondent for, I think, one of the Springfield papers. She used to phone in stories or something.
That was my Aunt Mildred.
That was your Aunt Mildred. Okay.
That was Jerry Selly's wife.
Okay, gotcha.
And she did that. She went to school here, and one day she was here, she lost sight in one of her eyes.
Okay.
And their doctor advised her to not be at school because she couldn't deal with the pressure. So she was also a gifted musician, and she did the newspaper stuff, and my Uncle Jerry did the photographing of everything all around town and that stuff. And of course, he worked his way from being a bread man and got into the school system, and he was head janitor for a lot of the school stuff. He was a town assessor.
Yep.
Oh,
He was a special police officer years ago. And so family was deeply, deeply involved in the community. One of the things I told myself was I was scheduled to, in the Vietnam era, to go to war and had my physical, and they said, have you ever had any injuries? And I said, well, sports injuries. So they sent me to a specialist, and I went from 1A to 4F. And at that point, I decided I want to be of service to my community because I couldn't do it the other way. So that's when I became a police officer, and
I want to point out on that, that was a difficult time in our nation's history. There was a lot of controversy about the Vietnam War, but there were people who sought 4F status so they wouldn't have to serve.
Yeah.
And then there were people like Norm who wanted very badly to serve, were ready to enlist. And they got 4F because, back in those days, family doctor probably didn't know about something that was going on, and so and that happened. But I want that clear here.
If I can again go back to the real estate industry just for a moment, I was very fortunate. I'm a small town guy. I'm a high school graduate. I had no college. And I was fortunately chosen to be president of the Greater Westfield Board of Realtors. And the following year, their Realtor of the Year. Along with that, I was chosen to be a director of the Westfield Chamber of Commerce. I went to the Springfield Association of Realtors because they had a much bigger program, and we arranged to merge the Greater Westfield Association into the Springfield Association, where I then became president of that board. That was like 1,500 members at the time, and fortunate to be their Realtor of the year after. Enjoyed being a state director for the Mass Association of Realtors, at which point I said, I don't want to go any further.
Enough.
Yeah. But had an interesting job I had when I did that was I was on a small committee which had to put together the protocol, the design, and the setup for buyer brokerage. There had never been anything like that. And we put that all together, and of course that's become a big part of the industry ever since. So real estate has brought me in some very wonderful directions and great experiences. But if I switch gears and go to the town, I remember being on the finance committee. I think it was 9 years. And Jim and I both served there. And Jim took over my chairmanship after I left and became town moderator. And before that, I always thought that the town meeting was a little, I don't know how to put it. I guess it was a little bit.
I'm going to be very interested
It was-
in how you put this.
It was a
together.
little bit boring. So I arranged to set up. So I had music at the beginning where I had Whitney Houston singing.
Oh, God.
And had made everybody listen to that. But it was, of course, it was the national anthem.
Yeah.
And I arranged to put a banner across College Highway to announce the town meetings.
Oh, nice.
Yep. And town meeting, again, purest form of government,
If you show up.
but sadly, soccer and baseball and so on became more popular than the town meeting.
Yeah.
And often it became a function of special interest groups.
Yep.
And they were able to control things more so than maybe they should have at times.
Yeah.
But I can also remember large town meetings
Yeah.
when we voted on things when I go ahead.
Well, that's going to be a good segue because one of the things I wanted to ask you, because I think it's one of your, lasting contributions to this community. We're sitting in it. So in sometime around 1980, you and I were on the finance committee. This was shut down as a school building. It was very emotional for the town at the time, but
Right.
they had kind of outgrown the building. And there were some folks who I think favored demolishing it or selling it or whatever. And there were others who said, it's a beautiful old historical building, we need to repurpose it.
Yep.
And so tell us the story of how we got from an abandoned school building to this. I think it's one of our proudest town landmarks, quite frankly. Beautiful town hall, senior center, other functions, and your role in that.
Yeah. Well, I was asked to chair a committee called the Town Complex Committee, if I remember correctly. And the purpose of that committee was to try to find out not only what to do with this building, but what to do with the police department and the fire department as well. And we spent thousands of hours studying it and again, my vice chair was Bud Engelhardt,
Okay.
and he was an incredible gem for this community. And we went through, I guess if you can't speak too much, you overwhelm people with paperwork, and he was a magician with paperwork. So we went through the whole process, came up with a proposal with shared structures, over there for police and fire, and with this being a town complex and administrative building and senior center. We got the senior center part done and whatever, but unfortunately at that particular time, I was still moderator, and we went before a town meeting, and I was able to hand the chair over to you, and it was voted down, primarily because at that time there was a large faction of people pushing to get sewers put in town. And they felt that having the town complex at that time would put sewers off, and they felt that was necessary to take place. Obviously, since that time, using the same architect and a lot of our original plans, they were able to put together this facility, which is striking and a wonderful place for a small town.
Yeah.
I also was fortunate in that I was able to chair the school facilities committee.
Oh, wow.
And we developed it as a building committee, and I chaired the committee to do the large addition on the Woodland School. And we were fortunate because we had a little bit of political activity on our mind and went to Boston, and we were able to arrange 80% financing for that project. And I think we were probably the only school in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, maybe even in its history, where we brought the project in under budget.
That's
Usually they're all over budget.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no.
And I think we were $350,000 under budget.
That's
So
huge.
we were able to go to the state, and we got permission to pour that $350,000 into the powder mill school, where you had that the media center we put in, all new floors, new doors, windows, and so on, and took care of some issues that were important at that time. Of course, the problem is when running that committee, it ended up running into being a roofing committee, and I got to chair that because GE put roofs on the schools that weren't functioning very well.
Right.
So I came up with the idea of having the children in the school put together a series of letters, and I sent them to the head of GE 10 at a time. 6 months later, we had new roofs arranged on the schools. I also was fortunate. While doing the schools, I realized that there was going to be some extra expense involved in having a larger building and such. So I founded the Regional School Study Committee. And I served on that, and we were able to get that through, which brought over $1 million in additional money to the town each year for education.
And that had been batted down at least 3 times previous in town meetings over many, many years. And I guess 4th time's the charm.
Well, I think a lot of times it's not just the subject matter involved, it's how you present it.
Sure.
Yeah.
And when you tell people that you can help them out $1 million extra a year in a small town, it rings a bell, I think. And we put a lot of work in studying it and so on, even though some of the school committee members weren't happy with that.
Well, no doubt it's brought many, many millions of dollars into this town. It was kind of ahead of the curve thinking because, as you know, about 10 years ago, the state pretty much forced Granville to join. And, you know, so it was going to happen sooner or later. It was fortunate that it happened with the town of Towland, I'm going to say 30 years ago.
Yes.
And we were off and running. I want to come back. We talked a little bit about it before, but this picture, you're familiar with it.
Right.
It's from, I believe, around 1895. And it's a picture of the house that most people in town now would know as Blossoming Acres, Putnam Farm before then, but that really dates you if you remember Putnam's living there. But Tell us a little bit more about the Holcomb family history, and because it's really significant to this town, Norm, and I know you're proud of it.
Yeah, I never knew too much about it until maybe even recent times. Amasa Holcomb obviously he developed the first telescope in the United States. And he also developed advanced tripods for surveying, and he was a surveyor. He was also a preacher. And he would test his telescopes by aiming them toward the steeple on the Methodist church, and so on. And of course, though his work and his telescopes are in the Smithsonian Institute. Wow. Kind of a big accomplishment for a real small town at that point. He obviously fathered my grandmother, and I'm pleased for that because she was a wonderful person and developed a wonderful family. Don't know a whole lot more about him than that, but I am somewhat proud of the fact that he was maybe he was the beginning of some of my energy and some of my creativity. I don't know.
I don't think there's a lot of old families left in Southwick. We talk that way sometimes, but I don't think there really are that go back to the early 1800s. And so you represent a family line that really does go back.
Yeah.
If Lee Hamburg were here, he might tell us it even goes back into the 1700s. I don't know.
I would say could, yeah.
But certainly the 1800s. And all the things that Amasa Holcomb did that the town is so proud of. It's great to be able to visit with his. Would it be great or great grandson? Great grandson.
Amasa Holcomb was my great grandfather.
Yeah. Okay. Great grandson. So here we got a piece of Amasa Holcomb to visit with today.
Well, I don't know if it put it that, but it's interesting too because my father's middle name is Amasa.
Ah, very good.
Yeah, and his brother's middle name is Holcomb.
Okay.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So that was interesting. I was fortunate, I think it's fortunate, I was able to serve on the volunteer library committee. And when we put up the volunteer library, which is a really nice facility. As with any volunteer project, it ran into its issues along the way.
Yeah.
But it eventually came to fruition and made for a nice facility in Southwick.
Joe doesn't know anything about the trials and tribulations of volunteer projects. His rule is no committee. It goes better.
Is that the appearance? Yeah. Oh, there's a full committee, not to worry about a thing.
Yeah.
Another thing that I'm somewhat proud of is that years ago I was chosen to be a corporator at Orinoco Savings Bank, and then eventually became a trustee, and then finished off being a director. And at that point, we went stock, and it went from a $10 stock to a $40 stock during my tenure there. And it was a nice experience because when I was younger, I had given passing thought to going into banking. So I was able to chair the nominating committee and chair the building committee and be on the technology committee, the marketing committee. And probably the more interesting part was being on the executive lending committee, where we got to have input into what mortgages were given out and weren't.
Wow.
So then, of course, Berkshire Bank took us over, and here's a little package, see you later.
Yeah.
Thanks for your years of service.
Exactly. 3 of our members went on to Berkshire Bank on their board of directors. Our president, one gentleman who was very, very involved in insurance, which was part of the deal, and another was very involved in technology. Myself, I didn't have any of those
You didn't
skills.
make the cut.
No. But one of the funnier things, maybe not funny, but maybe a little more interesting was I became a justice of the peace. And I did that for 27 years. And I married over 800 couples during that time frame.
Buy a house that comes with a marriage, like you
Well,
packaged,
that was
packaged everything up for them?
that was the gift. No.
Yeah, that was the gift. Keeps on giving.
But met a lot of interesting
Oh, I
people.
bet. Yeah.
Met some strange people, and I just think of one in particular two in particular that come to mind. One was marrying a couple in Stanley Park, and they handed me the license, and they wanted to be married in front of the prayer stone. And after they left, I looked at the license, and the lady I had married was married 7 times. And I said, now I know why they wanted to be in front of the prayer stone.
Wow.
And then I married a couple on Nantucket, and we married them on the shoreline. And they chose to have their German Shepherd dog as their best man. And during the ceremony, the dog became very actively digging. And by the time the ceremony was over, the couple was about a foot shorter than what they started.
Oh, boy.
But a lot of strange things, but interesting experiences, and I enjoyed it.
I'm going to hand it back to Joe in a minute, but I want to make an observation, Norm, on something you said before. You commented on how you never went to college, and I'm thinking, as we've talked over a full and active life of how much you did, I think you just would have wasted 4 years of your active duty. Nowadays, I think there's a better conversation going on that college isn't for everybody. And just because you didn't go to college doesn't mean you can't have a very successful and active life. And maybe when we went to high school, the expectations were a little bit different. But you were off and running really before you graduated from high school, but
Yeah.
certainly by the time a lot of your contemporaries were in college, you were trading real estate
Yeah.
and doing all these wonderful things for the town. So, thanks for visiting with us today. Thanks for a great story about a lot of different facets of Southwick history here.
Every
and-
major decision, you seem to be on that board. Back in the day.
A lot of
I mean,
people jokingly called me Mr. Southwick years ago, and I said, "Oh, I'm not sure that's a distinction I wish to carry." But I said, I really not. I haven't earned that, but I tried to do my part
You did do your part.
You did.
and
You
be
did
of
your part.
service
Absolutely.
and share what I could.
Yeah. That's wonderful.
And all I can say is thank you very, very much
Yeah.
for giving me the opportunity for doing this.
Well, that was our whole intent. Is unfortunately the stories go with you, and with technology today, we felt we should get out more. And I didn't know a third of that about you. Literally, yeah.
Yeah.
And I see you've done a good job of
Within the
organizing.
mess.
So if you now you're going to drive home and say, I wish I'd talked about.
Well, of
such
course
and
I'll
such."
say that.
And so put it on a card and
Yeah.
come back and visit us
Yeah.
another time. There's no rule that you can't come back and add some to the story.
Well.
But anyway, been a pleasure to
Yeah.
visit with you. Always was a pleasure to work with you on stuff. I'm
Were we-
sorry about the pig
Yeah.
and the shoveling chicken manure, but it's what we did. Joe?
What were the best years for you? They're all good. but
I
what
can
stands
honestly
out?
say that I've been happy with my life.
Yeah.
I wouldn't probably do much of anything different
Yeah.
than what I've done. Having high energy and doing my 100-hour work weeks every week for 35 years.
I understand.
And thought nothing of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
But best years, I guess I can't really say because they've all been wonderful.
They've all
and
been good.
And the experiences have been good. And, you know, it's just like I can close by saying that's the Storey's story.
There you go, folks. We'll see you guys in a few more weeks. Have a good day.